You got small, okay. Have you guys been to Trail Estate or? Okay, so you know, yes?
We cycle by with
Oh, okay, perfect. Well, I'm Mackenzie, so I'm the winemaker. And then the rest of the guests are my family and an employee of Trail. So they kind of know a bit of the background. But I thought I'd just, do you guys have, you can interrupt me at all if you have questions, just because it's pretty casual. But I thought I'd just tell you a bit about how I got into wine and maybe some of the challenges that I've had just for, not many, but just some of the challenges that would be unique to me, and then what Trail Estate is and kind of how I make wine in that regard. Mom? So I actually kind of fell into wine just by working in it. I was going to university studying arts and science, and I come from a long line of teachers, so both my parents are teachers and their families are teachers, so I was like, oh, of course I'll be a teacher. So I went to the University of Guelph and I studied biology and English to become a teacher. But along the way, I actually worked at Casadea, but at that time it was called Carmela Estates, where many of the wineries employees that have, many people who work in different wineries now actually started at Carmela Estates. And even before that, it was called Pedalston. So I worked there for a summer and just was doing tastings, tours, and unfortunately didn't know I knew. And other than that, I'm sure many of the things that I said were not true across the tasting bar. But then I really liked it, and they had this little window in the office that you could look down into the cellar. And so I saw, it was actually Norm Hardy was working there and Kimball Lacey, and both of them obviously own their own wineries now. And so I was looking down and I could see the yeast kind of bubbles over, or bubbles up in a bucket. So it looked quite cool. It was like mad science. And after that, I also discovered drinking while in university, of course. So that helped. And much cheaper bottles of wine than what I buy now, unfortunately. Or fortunately, I mean. And the other thing that they had at the University of Guelph was they had this wine tasting course, and it was an elective that you could get signed into. So I thought that was a great idea. Yeah. It was every Friday afternoon there was a wine tasting course, and I lived about a 5-minute walk from the campus, so it's quite convenient. And I don't remember retaining a lot of the knowledge from that course, unfortunately. But what I eventually did is I went back to school for winemaking. So I went to Niagara College, and they have a program that's called Winery. It's a winery technician and viticulture program. So it's quite good because you kind of cover a lot of the different bases, from winemaking to grape growing, and even a little bit more into the tasting and some of the the actual logistics of being in a winery. It's still a college program, so it's still a little bit of a surface program. So I've had to do a lot of my own learning as well. But of course, my degree really kind of helped to back up some of those fundamentals that I learned. And where am I going with this? Where was I going here? I've also just had a baby, so if I've forgotten, that's why, right? that's why, and I forgot to bring notes. Yeah, there we are. Yeah, so a part of Niagara College is an internship, and I had met Norm, obviously, while I was working at Carmela Estates. So I ended up doing my intern with him, and when I started, he was like, oh, I can't afford to pay you, but you can come and learn. And then it was really great that he ended up paying me, so that's always a good thing, yeah. But it was just at the time when he was starting to grow, so I ended up really falling in there and getting to do everything. So eventually I became his assistant winemaker and his vineyard manager. So he really throws you into the deep end, which was great. And I like to think I was up to the challenge because his winery is still standing. And he still has vines there, and he's growing exponentially. Like that place is huge now. But I really, really love his wines, the Pinot Noirs, the Chardonnays, especially. And his vineyards are pretty amazing. So I really loved it there. The other thing, have you guys been to Norman Hardy? Okay. And obviously you guys have drank a fair amount of Norm's wine. The other thing that he is really good about is that he has all these industry people that come in and all this culture of wine. So everyone brings in all these amazing bottles always. So we were constantly tasting some of the best wines that are available, especially out of Burgundy, because that's Pinot Noir, Chardonnay that he really loves. And I really you kind of get the bug while you're there. Because before I got into winemaking, when I was taking the course, wasn't exactly sure whether I should be winemaking or whether I should be more hospitality side. And while I was there, like once you start working in a cellar, it's pretty fun. And there's a lot less pretense, I guess, than when you're working in a restaurant. For me, I don't really care about how to properly open a bottle of wine. I think it's still, it has its place, but I would rather just open a bottle of wine and drink it and talk to people and enjoy it, and not worry too much about, I don't know, picking out every single specific flavor that's in there. So while I was at Norm's, I really had the opportunity to just learn as much as I can, and also I ended up at the end running his vineyard, and we were close to about 30 acres at that point, so it was a fairly large job, in addition to the tasting bar. And because it grew so much, I had my hands in a lot of other random things that have to do with running a winery and doing tastings, but I was getting too far away from actually doing a lot of this stuff myself. So I felt I needed to kind of step back and really learn, like be in the vineyard, do some pruning. So ended up going out west to Nanaimo. So on Vancouver Island, there are actually about 30 wineries. I had no idea really about any of those. That's Aubrey, just as a side note, if he's squawking. He's just commentating. He's like, oh, you shouldn't have said that, Mom. But in Nanaimo, so there are 2 wineries in Nanaimo, and one of them was established there for a little bit, and the other one were friends of mine who owned a restaurant in this area, and they had opened a restaurant without a lot of knowledge, and they did a really great job with it. So then they were like, oh, well, if we did a restaurant, we may as well be able to do a winery, which is interesting thinking, because a lot of people start wineries with that thinking. But they were just about to have a baby, so they weren't going to be able to be on the property right away. And it was a vineyard that had been run down, so they needed someone that they could trust and that would be able to take that winery and vineyard and kind of bring it up to speed. So they hired me because they had known me before. And they actually flew me out, so I would go out there for 2 weeks and come home for 5 days. So I did that for about a year. And during that time, I was the only person on the property for the summer months, so had to do all of the work myself, such as I had to buy a tractor, I had to drive the tractor, buy the tractor, drive the tractor, buy a lot of the equipment. And it really allowed me to see some of the challenges some of the things that I can do and some of the things that I can't, which are very important in the wine industry. So I don't weigh a lot, I'm not the strongest person, so tractor mechanics and some of the equipment can be a bit of a challenge. And so it's good to know that and not try and fight through that and just be like, this is something you should hire someone for, this is something that I can do. Whereas more, being in the vineyard, making decisions on pruning and all those kind of things are a little bit easier. Well, those are more things that are suited to me. But I mean, tractor equipment falling off of tractors isn't something that happens all the time, so that's good. But there was some interesting challenges. Like one day I had a piece of equipment fall off the tractor, and I couldn't pick it up, and I didn't know anyone around, so I ended up having to call one of the contractors that was building a house for them, and he came out and helped me pick it up. It's like there's nothing I can do. It's like a 200-pound, 200-pound object. But you learn ways around that, like levers and all sorts of stuff. So I learned quite a bit. The other thing that I did on their property, which was interesting, is the winery hadn't been used in 10 years. So I had to sort through a ton of equipment and convert it up to more modern. So we use all stainless steel in the winery and just make sure everything's food grade. So I did that. So it's quite an experience, and it really, without that, I don't think I would have been really ready to move into trail estate. So I did my first vintage as a head winemaker out west, and then I came back and trail estate had opened up. And it is a really great winery to work for. It's probably the best winery in terms of not owning. I have so much control over how we grow our grapes, what we produce, and what wines we make. And it's wonderful. So the idea behind trail estate is small batch winemaking. So that means that we will make anything as small as 9 cases and as large as 260 cases, which is really quite small. 260 cases, maybe you're getting 4 or 5 pallets of wine, and usually, when you sell, even in a small release to the LCBO, a pallet of wine doesn't go very far at all. And 9 cases is, I probably won't do that small a batch ever again. But that was my first year of winemaking, and it allows me to experiment quite a bit. So we make a lot of different varieties. In 2015, I took all of the different vineyards that we worked with, and I split them into different styles of wine. So for example, I had a Sauvignon Blanc. One of those, so that got split 3 ways. The fruit, we picked all the fruit at the same time. It came in, and one of them I fermented on the skins. So I actually did a little bit of an unusual winemaking style in that your skins can sometimes impart bitterness, and a lot of white wine, you separate out those skins right away. This wine I actually fermented with the skins, so it's almost like aromatics that are on steroids. And then the other component of that fruit I fermented in oak, and it was just 2 barrels that I fermented, and so it was a little bit of a barrel ferment. And then the third one, which is actually here, was the larger portion of that fruit, and that was a stainless steel ferment, so more of a classic Sauvignon Blanc. So it's very fun for winemaking because you get to make, the fruit comes in and I can decide exactly what I want to do with it. Thanks for the laugh. Yeah. Do you guys have any questions?
Yes.
Yes, okay, good. Let's do that.
Mackenzie, right?
Because I ramble a bit, I think.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So how long have you've done this, so how long was that process, that whole process?
I started the college program in 2008.
Okay.
So not quite, so we're rounding up now, 9 years.
How were your teacher legends before you? What was their reaction to veering from that?
These are actually my parents, so we could.
No, I knew that.
Yeah, okay.
So I was waiting. I thought maybe they might like
I don't know, actually. What do you guys think?
I was going to be a winemaker, what?
I think they. Oh, I forgot about that. Yes, I also traveled. So I went to South Africa. So they were probably a little apprehensive about that. And then while I was in that harvest, I met the man who became my husband. So that was a little bit strange because I came home. I actually went straight from South Africa to New Zealand, and I remember calling my parents and saying I'd met this man, and I actually have a stepson now as well. But so I met this man, and he has a child, and I was in New Zealand, and then I went back to South Africa. So they were maybe less worried about the winemaking and more worried about the decisions I was making.
So we get that clear.
Yeah, but I think that some of the travels, some of the travels were maybe more interesting. But they, I think, are supportive because I bring home wine, which is important. Yeah, yeah. Just working. Yeah, I worked at 2 different wineries in South Africa that were pretty incredible. One of them is Bouchard Finlayson, which is a pretty well-known winery. You can buy some of the wines in the LCBO, and it's beautiful there. It was stunning weather as well. Here in Ontario, it's cold in harvest. It's like this year we pressed Cab Franc this year was a challenge because I was also pregnant. So that's been, for a small winery, being a winery with not many employees, being pregnant was like, just in my own mind too. I want to do everything myself, so it was a challenge. But I was pressing wine in December, so it was cold and freezing. Whereas South Africa, you're processing your fruit and it's 30 degrees and sunny. And they actually have these giant 8,000 liter container tanks. So you actually forklift the fruit up onto the roof, and then you tip bins into your destemmer, which drops it right into these tanks. And you can see all down this valley over the vineyards, and you can see the ocean. So it was pretty spectacular. And then the other winery worked at, Sumer Ridge. It wasn't nearly as picturesque in processing. It was more just harvest. In the Hemelanarda. So it's about an hour and a half east of Cape Town. Yes. Heaven and Earth Valley is what it's called, yeah. And it is like heaven on earth. It's beautiful, yeah. It's so stunning there. I'm actually pretty excited. We're going back in Christmas, so I'll have to do my wine tasting again and check in with all the winemakers. And it's really amazing to have wine to bring that I've made back to them and to show them. So, and that's the reason I ended up there was Norman Hardy is actually from South Africa. So a lot of the people that worked at his winery have actually gone and worked at Bouchard Finlayson. And then there's also another winery just south of there or just down the road called Hamilton Russell. And a lot of the actually people in this area that work in the industry have worked at that winery. So, yeah.
How many years have you been at
Trail Life started in 2015, so I'm just coming up now to 2 years, so 2015 and 16, 2 vintages, and it's gone really well. They're a very new winery, so their first vintage was 2013. So we're really just starting to get into kind of finding our style and just figuring out what we like to make. We do work with a fair amount of Niagara fruit. We'll always work with some Niagara fruit or some fruit that's not from Prince Edward County. Our vineyard's quite small, it's 6.5 acres, and most of that is Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and we have a little bit of Baco Noir as well, and like a spattering of rose to make something strange with. But we do purchase from Niagara a lot of Riesling and Cabernet Franc, and I really like those 2 varieties from Niagara, and I prefer Pinot and Chard from the county. Which is nice because they seem to listen to me, which is great. So we've planted things that I wanted. So I like it. Yeah, I pretty much just get to spend someone else's money and drink someone else's wine. So.
How many staff are at a winery like that? Like how many people, including the staff that you bring in for harvest, what does it take to run the whole operation?
It depends on your systems. But for us, when we started, we were seasonally. We had 1 Thai worker. Then we had myself, and then the owner, Alex, who's here. It's his family that run the, that's Ryan. Ryan's helping me out as well. Alex in the winery. Alex's family owns, it's the Sproul family. Anton and Hildegard are the parents, and then their daughter, Sylvia, and son, Alex. So Alex does most of the operations and the graphic design, and Sylvia is the accountant. So they're a family of 4. I'd say they're like 1 full-time employee and then kind of 2-ish part-time roles, and then myself. So it's quite small. Over the winter, we went down to just myself and Alex. We don't make a lot. We make about 1,500 cases right now. However, in the summer, we are increasing our staff. I used to do a lot of the tasting bar, and I'm off right now. So they've got people doing very specific jobs. For instance, Ryan is doing a lot of the vineyard consulting, so making sure that things happen, and some of the winemaking. And then Alex he does a lot of the events and the admin, and he's got a couple people doing tastings on the weekends. And then we have a couple people in the vineyard. So, yeah, go for it. This is good. It's better.
How does weather in the county differ from weather in other wine regions you've worked in, and like what are the pros and cons of the weather here?
The huge con is the weather. Yeah. Prince Edward County has got to be one of the toughest places to grow grapes, and the reason being the winter temperatures and summer humidity. Unfortunately, our winters are very cold, which means we have to bury our vines. So your traditional vine, you will end up having your canes that will come up and they'll grow, and then you'll actually tie some of those down and put them underground. So you go through with the tractor with it's called a V-plow, and you actually push the soil. So you form these hills, which you'll see as you go around the county now. Most of them are down, if not almost down. So some of them will have little remainders of soil, which has been great for the last week of frost that we just had. Ours are still mostly buried. And what that does is anything that's kind of under -20, so if it gets colder than -20, you might see some damage, or you probably will in something like Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, especially in the county. Oh. Sorry, guys. Sorry, Obs. That's scary. He's just 3 months, so that's why we brought the whole family. So what happens, say you have -29, chances are your vine might actually die. You might not just, if it's kind of -22, you might have some damage and your plant might keep growing, but like once it gets to -30, you're toast pretty much. So,
Question to add to that.
yeah.
Given that the weather is so bad, why has it become such a popular wine region?
I will get to that, yes. So the challenges are huge. However, there's no doubt in my mind that this is a great wine region because of the limestone soil. The quality that we get from Pinot Noir and Chardonnay is incredible, and I fully believe in, especially Chardonnay. It's delicious. Pinot Noir is a lighter style, so I mean, when you grow Pinot Noir in different regions, you can really see the tannin profiles in some, whereas the county is a lot lighter and a little bit more. I always get like a lot of cranberry and citronella out of county fruit. And we're very lucky. Norman Hardy has done a ton of legwork in terms of putting the county on the map, even internationally. Like, he's gotten incredible reviews. So it's really nice coming in as kind of the second generation winemaker, and that hard work has already been done. I just have to make wine, which is great. I don't have to fight for, why Prince Edward County should be here. Or, I mean, if I'm wrong, everyone else is wrong and crazy, I guess would be the...
Do you get a lot of visitors to your winery?
We do. We don't have the longest opening hours. For example, over the winter, it's pretty quiet. We're also a newer winery, so it's taking a little bit of time to get onto people's radar. So generally, people that arrive they'll hit the bigger wineries like Norm's Rose Hall, Hinterland, but we usually get that second hit where you almost always referred. And then we've started getting some really great reviews. We've had, just recently, we've just started getting some good feedback, which is nice because it's good to have some job security in this world. So, job security, yeah. Yeah. So you're going to need to support us. There's no pension plans in winemaking, so. But yeah, in terms of the climate, though, humidity in the summer can be a challenge. Last year, for example, though, was very dry. So it's nice we do have huge vintage differences. So the really hot, dry years, you end up with a little bit more concentration, a little bit of those riper flavors, whereas the cooler years, you get a little bit higher acidity and maybe just a little different flavor profile in your wine. Other areas in the world, though, South Africa, for example, where I worked, they call themselves cool climate, but it's laughable when you come from somewhere like this. Cool climate in South Africa just means that it's very, very hot there, but they have some nice breezes coming off the ocean, and all that kind of changes the flavors in the grapes. So the Pinot Noir at Bouchard Finlayson is a much heavier wine. I find it's really rich, and compared to County Pinot, which is that much lighter, more like, I don't know, just lighter, like cranberry and lemon flavors.
Why do you produce ice wine in Niagara region when you can't produce it here, even though it gets so cold?
Because we bury our vines. So the problem is we really stress every year to get our vines buried in time, because once it starts raining and snowing, if it rains in the fall and your vineyard's wet, it's very slippery with the tractor, and it's tough to, you can take out whole rows if you slide your tractor. So you want to really make sure that you get in there just at the right time. You don't want to do it too early, because then they are sitting underground, but you want to get right in there at the perfect time and get them covered in soil before it freezes over. There are some new things happening. People are using geotextiles, which is it's a white fabric you might see out there. And there are vineyards in Quebec that do it exclusively, which is amazing. We have a few test rows at Trail Estate that we've seen some really nice vines underneath, I guess. So you literally just cover them with that fabric, and you have to kind of pin them down and close them, much like you would probably with any of the bushes in your garden. You just cover them up, and it just stops the cold from going in. So Brock has been doing some studies and showing that the temperature underneath the geotextile is actually significantly warmer. Like, for instance, when it's been minus 28, it's been maybe minus 20 or minus 18 underneath, which is really great. But so we don't do ice wine, which was the question, because of that reason, just because you would have to leave your vines, your fruit hanging, and then you wouldn't really be able to bury them.
You can't leave it up because it would just get so damaged that...
You just wouldn't be able to pull your canes down and get in with the soil. You would have to go through by hand maybe and pack snow around the vines. You would just run the chance of your vine dying if it gets too cold, which is kind of funny for making ice wine. It would get too cold. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. How are we doing for time here?
You are the last speaker of the day.
Okay. This is nice, yeah.
You're the first one that I haven't had to say.
Well, good. Okay.
The frost of May 2015.
Yeah. Trail Estate. I was not at Trail at that time, so I didn't exactly see how things happened. We are in a little bit of a low patch, which is not great for frost. But unfortunately, our whole vineyard was wiped out, basically. So 2015, the entire harvest we purchased fruit from Niagara. Just the timing of when that frost hit us, and the temperature was close to -5, about -5, which really nukes everything, because anything green it's dead. The vines didn't die, which is great. So you do run the risk, and that's a fairly costly, that will make or break you, basically. But where it hit in Niagara, it was just not as cold, and just the fruit survived, the vine survived a little bit better. So, yeah, certain pockets of the county, I think we were down to, the whole county was about 30% production in 2015. It's heartbreaking. So 2016 we did harvest from our vineyard, which is great. So it's just starting to come into fruit. 2017, this year, we should be getting quite a bit more county fruit, which will be really nice to see what I'm working with finally. Okay. What else should we talk about? Mom? Any questions? Your mother always has a comment, though, I think, right? So just like to check in. Oh, yeah, so I've been experimenting with some skin contact. So traditionally what I was saying with the winemaking is your white wine making, almost always you separate your skins and you just use the juice to make wine. With skin contact or skin fermented wines, you actually keep those skins. So much like you would make a red wine, you use the the skins. So you run the risk, sometimes they can be a little bit bitter. But what I did last year is I did a Gewürztraminer. So the fruit comes in and I knocked the stems off, so got rid of the stems and just kept the berries. So they're whole berries, they're like a little broken up, so there is some juice that comes out. And then fermentation started naturally. I'm a big fan of wild yeast. I want just fruit to really speak for itself, and I don't want to throw too much stuff at it. And so I took the fruit and put it into a tank, and it started fermenting on its own. I do taste through everything every single day, which when you're pregnant, all that acid is wonderful. That's been a challenge of the job. You spit everything out, of course, so don't worry about that. But what happens is the carbon dioxide from the fermentation pushes all those skins up to the top, and then I push them back down because I want all the extraction out of them. I want to get different flavors and a little bit of that bitterness out of the skins. And so I would do that twice a day. Pregnant punch downs, they're very gentle. I actually didn't, I had an intern last year, so he did a lot of the lifting for me. But that wine is, I just took those skins and kind of kept them with the fermenting wine until it went dry, until the fermentation finished, and pressed it out. And so we'll be bottling that in another 2 weeks. But yeah, is that the one you tried?
That's one I really like. I liked a lot of them, but
yeah.
That one was
okay.
Did the parents at the winemaker get free unlimited wine? That's the
no, try some, like sometimes.
Yeah.
No,
There are limits. Yeah.
yes.
There's lots of wine around, though.
Yes, it's,
Yeah. Lots of wine.
I didn't even think you were legal to drink beer.
I wasn't the first year, yeah. Yeah. I don't worry, Mom. I didn't drink that much. That much wine anyway, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, did you drink anything when, did you do tasting when you were in Korea?
No, not really. I did in between my university and college. I did work in Korea, but teaching English, which really got teaching out of my system because I just didn't like it. But what I'll say is, I have always, anywhere I've traveled in the world, I've really been into kind of tasting and like the food and the wine or the beverages that are there, because it's good just to taste and kind of smell and learn everything. I've always been into smelling a lot of stuff, so you perhaps should have known at that point. But
And Germany.
yeah, I've had through wine quite a good chance to travel and taste wine. So I went to Germany last year for work, and I just set up a week of wine tasting. So I made appointments in advance. I'm a big fan of German wines just because of the structure that a lot of the Rieslings have. And I found that in Ontario, some of our wines were lacking in that structure. Like, we've always got a really great sugar acid balance, like they're delicious to drink, but German wines just had that little bit more on the palate. So I wanted to investigate and talk to people. And I actually found out that they do end up using a fair amount of skin contact sometimes, or a lot of the stems, in fact, which I thought was kind of crazy, because usually your stems are can be very bitter. Yeah, so that was fascinating. And I also just got to see tons of wineries. And with Norm as well, he took us to Burgundy. We went to Burgundy. We checked out Chablis and Alsace. And Alsace, again, just across the border, was really wonderful to see some of those more aromatic varietals. So I got to do that. But yeah.
What's a wine region that you really want to go to that you've never been to?
Oh, that's a good question. For view, I would love to go to Greece, just to check things out, to see all the different varieties they're making. But I think Italy. So what I was talking about, my winemaking style, a little bit more hands-off. Like, I'd rather just, kind of, there's still tons of winemaking, don't get me wrong. Like, we're minimalist winemaking, you're still like moving wine around and putting it in different containers, like it's still winemaking, but I don't like to add stuff, I guess. So I will only add something if I have to. Like, I will use sulfur because that stops your wine from being vinegar, and but I won't use a ton of sulfur, just what's needed. But Italy has a lot of natural winemakers now, and a lot of more, like a lot of stuff that's done in kind of in amphoras, into like clay pots or older oak. And I've met a few winemakers from Italy who I like their wines. So I would like to check out Italy, and also for the food. I think that would be pretty wonderful, wine and food, yeah. And yourself?